Hello, and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Today, I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. He's an absolutely brilliant author. Oh, Agat's here as well. He's over
Hi.
there. Today's author is the amazing S.J. Watson, author of Before I Go to Sleep. We're going to talk about his new book, Final Cut, which is out now, and you can grab a copy of it. So he's going to talk to us about that today. So without further ado, welcome.
On and off. Hello. How's it going?
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Well, we're fantastic. It's very nice to have you on the show, and
Thank you.
it's a hot day today when we're recording.
Yeah.
It's not heating up yet. Well, it is, but it's going to get very hot. So, whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm in East Sussex at the moment. Yeah.
Sussex. Yeah. So, are you feeling the temperatures like we are?
I'm really lucky actually because I'm in quite an old house, so it doesn't in the winter it's freezing cold, but in the summer luckily it doesn't ever get too hot. But having said that, I have got all the windows open and I've got a fan pointing right at me. So
that's fantastic.
And it's only 25 to 11 in the morning. So yeah, that's me again in 3 hours time.
So have you got any nice plans for today, SJ?
I have actually, yeah. My mum is throwing me a socially distanced barbecue to celebrate the launch of the new book.
Fantastic.
I'll be disappearing off to eat overcooked chicken later.
That sounds amazing.
So how have you felt the book launch now? And obviously, it's a very strange time that we're in.
Yeah,
and it's kind of different from, I guess, other releases. So how is that? Is that very different to what you normally do?
Yeah, it is very different actually. I mean, because normally at this stage I'd be out probably sitting on a train now. So that's quite a good thing. But I'd be on my way to a book signing or a tour of bookshops or an event or whatever. And actually, that's a really nice part of the job. It doesn't feel like a job sometimes, but that's a really nice part of having a book out. Is going out and meeting people and sort of seeing that reaction. And so while I'm still doing events, they're online and they're on Zoom and whatever. And that's a very different experience. It's nice in a way, I think, because I don't have to sit on a train and stay in hotels and stuff, which it gets a bit draining as well.
Yeah.
But it's all happening in my living room, which is quite nice. But then, by the same token, I'm not getting to meet people. I'm not getting to sort of get that sort of immediate reaction of people about the book. So it's kind of, I feel slightly sort of, slightly disconnected from it all. So it's kind of weird.
Are you getting sent deliveries of your book to your house, like hundreds and hundreds of copies to sign and send off, or?
No. No, I'm getting. I've done a few book plates. They're kind of sticky labels that I sign and then people send back to the store and they put in the front of the book. But yeah, that's another thing. It's kind of strange not to be doing that. I went up to a bookstore called Goldsborough Books in London last week and signed some copies. I don't know how many, quite a few. So I think they've got some available. But yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of that process in, say, normal times where you do all those sort of different promotions? Is there a favorite part of that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sitting in front of a live audience and asking, and I always like the Q&A question, part of the events like that, because I think it feels a bit more sort of real and a bit more. You never know what curveballs are going to come, so I kind of like. I sort of miss that.
Have you had any real curveballs in that respect? Crazy questions?
Not massive one. I mean, I was speaking to someone the other day who actually, no, this is over Zoom. Actually, yeah, she was telling me she has a stalker who decided that they would flash at her during the Zoom.
Wow.
Yeah. So no, I haven't had that.
We can't promise you anything as good as that. I'm sorry.
No. I was once asked if I was single. That was a strange question. I wasn't expecting. I was expecting some in-depth analysis of the book, but no, it was, "Are you single?" It's quite flattering. Very nice. Yeah. Unless they were just interested, just I was once asked in Birmingham why my character wears such terrible clothes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think and in Cheltenham I was asked whether I really thought I could write from a woman's point of view. So
how obviously you must describe your characters very well and in depth for them to pick up on this style of clothing and judge it that well.
Well, yeah, I think there was. I think that person in Birmingham was referring to one particular combination of clothes, which other people have also pulled me up on.
That's very interesting.
The other women who said, nobody would ever wear that. Like, okay, I hold my hands up. I got that wrong.
I mean, there's plenty of ways to judge a story, literally from the cover onwards, and it's really strange that someone would pick up the clothing, as a critical point. But
no, and that was kind of strange because it was a sort of homecoming gig, for want of a better word, I suppose, because I'm from that area, and this is before I go to sleep with the first book, so it's nearly 10 years ago now. But they'd done with the paperback, they'd done a whole sort of citywide reading group was the idea. So every library had been handing out copies, and the idea was, and then it would culminate in a big event at the library. Birmingham. So in front of I don't know how many hundreds of people. My family were there. It was all kind of, so I think it was a strange. I think it was also partly because it was probably the first time I'd ever sort of done an event with a whole group of people who'd read the book. So normally you can't talk about stuff with books like this, can you? Well, books like that, and also books like the current one because of spoilers. So yeah.
How do you feel? Sorry, Chris.
No, I was going to say. So obviously the success of Before I Go to Sleep was huge. It was like a global phenomenon. And then you've taken a gap in between and now released this book, Final Cut. How did that weight of expectation, because obviously you've got really good following for the first book, really good reception. Did that sort of bear on your mind when you were writing this book, and did it affect the process?
Not so much with this book. There is another book between the two though that you've everyone forgets about. Yeah. So in 2015, I put out one called Second Life. That book, yeah, it did. I mean, it's weird because at the time I don't think I was really aware of how much the success of Before I Go to Sleep had kind of impacted my process when I was writing that book. I think I thought I was doing fine, and and putting it out of my mind and ignoring it, because it's that sort of strange thing that. You have to try and write, especially the first draft of a book. You have to try and write it, I think, as if no one is going to read it. Certainly, as if no one is going to read it. You allow yourself, and when you're writing your first book, that's kind of really easy to do because the chances are no one is going to read it. And then the success of Before I Go to Sleep was wonderful, and I'm not in any way complaining. But it did mean that, when I sat down to write the second book, it's like, I can't even pretend that no one's going to read this because, in the very immediate level, my agent's going to read it and then my editors. But then, once it goes out, there are going to be potentially, 6 million people who might be at least a little bit interested. So it was a very strange sort of experience. This book, with Final Cut, I didn't really feel that as much, I think. I think it was kind of a difficult second album syndrome with the second book, obviously. By the time it felt like I got something to prove, or I don't know, or something to, it felt like there was a huge weight of expectation on that book. Whereas with Final Cut, it doesn't feel quite the same. And I mean, this sounds like a really crappy thing to say, perhaps, but I really did sort of remind myself that when I got into this, I never anticipated being a global bestseller, or what is it, a phenomenon, as you call it. I mean, it might have been on my wish list if I'd been arrogant or dared to wish for that, stuff like that. But I mean, I never ever expected it, obviously, because I don't think anyone does. So, so I kind of didn't feel that sort of quite the same sense. I just felt with this book, I just wanted to write a book I was really proud of, and that's right. And I sort of remembered back to why I did this in the first place, because I wanted to write stories, I wanted to entertain people, I wanted to write a book I was really happy with and proud of, and so that's where I ended up with Final Cut, and just kind of sort of enjoyed it a lot more because I took the pressure off myself, and I think it shows. I think it's a better book for it.
So you mentioned there that your writing came from a place of wanting to, create something entertaining and all that sort of stuff. So going back to where it all began, was there like an influencing moment in your life where that happened, or was there something that really drove you to want to write books?
I can't really put my finger on a moment, but I mean, I read, it's kind of classic story, really. I'm kind of a cliche in a way. I'm an only child, rubbish at sport, good at English at school. I went to a kind of comprehensive in the West Midlands where, getting good exam results was not going to endear you to my classmates, where, they kind of judged you were sort of judged on how far you could spit, not kind of. So I never felt I kind of fitted in, and so books were a kind of escape for me. I loved, for as long as I remember, I've loved reading, and they kind of went to the library every week and got my six books, devoured them, and then went back and swapped them over the next week. So it was kind of that cliche thing about just books were my kind of escape, and I sort of knew I wanted to do that from as long as I can remember, really. Yeah. But then I sort of, my life took a slightly different path. I ended up deciding I needed a kind of slightly more sensible career. So I ended up working for the health service because I did sort of, I think I believed all the stuff that you read about books and publishing and stuff, which is that it's incredibly difficult to get a book published. It's incredibly difficult to make a career from it, and and it sort of is, I suppose. I am an outlier. I am one of the lucky ones. Your question was actually so long ago now, I can't remember what it was.
It's about where it all came from, and you did, answer that. But when you were talking about those books that you used to go back and read, when you first started getting lost in the world of books, is there anything that still stands out to you now from those sort of selections back then?
Yeah, it's weird because I used to really love fantasy, like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Lord of the Rings, obviously. And I remember a very damp caravan holiday in Cornwall where I don't know, I think I was really 9 or 10 or something, and I was ploughing my way through the Silmarillion. And looking back now, I didn't understand a bloody word of that book. I don't know why I decided I needed to, read every single word of this book I wasn't enjoying and didn't really understand. But so there was something about that sort of genre, I suppose. And then I can't really there wasn't a specific book. It was interesting actually because I carried on writing, but then my career kind of took over, and I became more and more invested in my NHS career. So the writing became less of a thing for me, I suppose, in a way, more of a hobby and less of a passion, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, I remember I read The Handmaid's Tale, and I didn't know anything about it. Looking back, actually, and this is probably, I don't know, when I was maybe early 30s, something like that. And that was a book. I mean, it's not my favorite book by any means. It's not even really my favorite Margaret Atwood book, but it is a book. I remember reading it and thinking it kind of reconnected me with the fact that this is what I'd always wanted to do. And it kind of came at a strange time because I was about to, my boss, I was deputy head of a department, and my boss was about to retire. He was approaching retirement, and so the next logical career step would be for me to kind of like apply for his job. And I just knew I didn't want to do it. And then this book came along, and I read that and thought that's what I wanted to do, was to create a world like Atwood did in that book, to create a story that is kind of entertaining and page turning, but also moves, says something, I suppose, for want of a better way of putting it. And so when I read that book, that's what reconnected me with the fact that my life wasn't really on the track that I wanted it to be, or had anticipated it being on. And that's so when I made some decisions about changing stuff. So yeah, that book was kind of very instrumental. Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a couple of comments sections of reviews that I've got from your new book. Which, by the way, if you're watching,
you're going to read bad reviews at me.
No. If you're watching this, by the way, I just put up in the top corner, Final Cut. I put up the cover up in the corner so you can see it there. But the first one, I loved this book. It was chilling, scary, suspenseful, full of twists and turns, and captivated me from the first page. There's quite a few authors, new writers that like to listen to this show. And just focusing on those sort of comments, is there a way, do you have any certain procedures or any tips you've got that may help people in that respect, to write something that is scary, suspenseful, and full of twists? Because it's quite a task to get that sort of work, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as far as sort of the chilling and scary, I still, people tell me that the books are scary, and I'm still like, really? I think. But I suppose it's because I've been so sort of involved in the nuts and bolts of putting it together, and if you like, and so it doesn't really hold any surprises for me, because I suppose it becomes a sort of technical question of how do I make this work, and how do I make this chapter flow into the next, and how do I make, and so I lose sight in a way of the the meat on the, I don't know how you think of it, whatever. Yeah, I lose sight of the fact that actually this is quite a scary thing. This incident that I'm talking about is quite scary, I suppose. So I don't have any. I think it's as far as kind of making it suspenseful and hooky and the other words, page turning and twists and stuff. I think it's about, for me, it's about trying to be unexpected. As in, and I'm when I'm editing, especially, and also when I'm writing and planning now, but I'm always aware of, I don't know, like when is the chance that someone might put this book down because this chapter's a bit, it flags a little bit, or do you know what I mean? And I try and inject a little bit of something to just. I always remember. I don't remember who said it to me, unfortunately, but I do remember talking to someone about getting an agent, and the image. I don't know what they said, but the image that came into my head is like, you know, when you imagine, for example, my agent Claire, she's so busy all the time, you know, because I think looking after me is probably a full-time job. I'm one of, I don't know how many authors she looks after, but you know, when you think she's got that, and then you know she's probably sitting in her office, and I've been there now. She has a mobile under her arm. She's typing an email to somebody. Her assistant is kind of hovering at the door with a message of somebody else. I'm physically in the room trying to talk to her. You know, she's got so many plates spinning, and she's also has to, you know, eat and have a cigarette or whatever, and she probably has another cup of coffee for hours. And so I always sort of have this mental image of an agent sitting there in that situation, also reading your manuscript. And I think, you know, your manuscript has to be more interesting. At every single point in time, it has to be more interesting than the kettle or whichever the current thing is, you know, that is pressing on the agent's mind, because otherwise they're going to put it down and go and make themselves a cup of coffee or light a cigarette or whatever it is that they want to go and do. So I think it's at a very kind of basic level. It's okay. Would somebody be able to put this down now? Would this be a good place for them? I'll put that down and I'll leave it. I mean, having said that, you can't have a book that's high octane from page 1 to page 300. You know, you need to have some, you know, different notes and different, you know, things in it.
I think that's a really good point, though. If you're starting out as well, that if you're writing something that you think may be a really sort of a point in that book where it may be drifting off, to focus on that as well and maybe rethink it. So it is a valid point in that respect.
Yeah,
you know, like you said, very basic.
Yeah.
So SJ, I'm really interested at that point when you said that you could have applied for your manager's job essentially, or you could go on to writing an amazing book. How did you decide to do that in your mind, and what was that process like?
It was a strange one, because I've always been quite sort of well, certainly back then I was quite sort of conservative with a small c, as in I played everything very safe, I think I would say. I mean, I did physics at university because I was good at it. It wasn't because I had a passion for physics. It wasn't because I just, you know, it was because I knew I could, well, as it turned out, at degree level, I wasn't that good at it. But, you know, so I wasn't someone who just think, oh, you know what, I'm going to sell the house and go and travel the world for, you know, or go and live in Mexico or something. That's just not really in my DNA even now. It certainly wasn't then. So, but then I had this moment, and, you know, read The Handmaid's Tale, boss was about to retire, I was approaching my 40th birthday, and all these kind of things came together. And I just thought, you know, not in a kind of morbid sense, I don't think, but I did sort of think when I get near the end of my life, when it's too late basically to do all this kind of stuff, you know, I'm not going to look back on my life and think, oh, I wish I'd trained to be a vet. I'm not going to look back on my life and think, you know, but if I look back on my life and I never even tried to have a novel published, if I never really took it seriously and went for it, I will regret that. That will seem, I know, I suppose it's that thing, you can't keep on, you have these vague ambitions or these vague ideas, and you can't keep putting them off forever. I think, you know, 40 is obviously not very old. And I say that especially now, I'm approaching 50, but you know, it's not like you're not really old, but it is a landmark birthday. And for me anyway, I think it was the first time I really sort of thought, I haven't got, I mean, no one's got forever and nobody knows how much longer they've got, you know what I mean? But it was that kind of, I haven't got, you know, forever to achieve all these ambitions. So I need to really focus on what do I want to do. So it was that kind of moment of me thinking, I've got to actually do something and take some risks. So So yeah, I remember I went to see my boss and I said I'd like to go part-time, because my plan originally was to go part-time in my job and give it a few years and spend the however long working part-time in health service and the rest of the time working on novels and writing. And he said I couldn't. It wasn't a part-time job. So when I tell the story, I like to imagine that I flounced out of the office and said, well, I'm leaving. I mean, that's not quite what happened. It's a bit more of a considered decision than that. But I did sort of basically think, well, okay, well, actually this writing stuff is important to me. And so if I can't go part-time in this job, I'll apply for a job where I can go part-time. And that felt kind of hugely liberating, because there was a job that coincidentally came up that was part-time, and it was much more junior. So I went from sort of being deputy head of a department to being a fairly junior clinician. And that was great because I got much more time and also much more energy, because I didn't have to take work home with me. It was much more it was still very important work, obviously, but it wasn't quite so strategic, I suppose. So, I could work in the evenings and stuff. I mean, and also in a weird sort of way, my take home pay kind of halved overnight, because I not only went from full-time to part-time, but also from this band to this band. But that felt fine. I think it gave me a bit of a kick up the bum as well, because I thought, I suppose it was like, I've actually made a real sacrifice. This isn't a kind of, I haven't just decided to stop watching EastEnders or I'm making a real sacrifice, which has negatively impacted my career. And everyone who knew me in the career was like, well, what are you doing? No one does that. No one, I mean, going part-time, yeah, although that's quite unusual for a man, but that's strange. But like, you've gone from band 8 to band 7 or whatever. And but so I think for that reason, I thought, there's no way I'm going to now spend this extra time that I've bought for myself watching daytime TV,
So once you had made that transition then, and you've taken, I guess, the big leap, what was you said your first book 10 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
That process there, stepping into that world and that process, and how much has that changed over the time to releasing sort of Final Cut now? Is there a similar process, and what was that like, stepping into that world for the first time then?
The writing part or the publishing part?
A bit of both, really. I mean,
I was very lucky with Before I Go to Sleep, because literally the week that I handed in my notice, I saw an advert for the Faber Academy, which is a writing course, and they were doing a 6-month writing novel course, and that started the week I started my new job. It was all very sort of like, it all very much fitted in. And that kind of gave me a bit of a kickstart. So I wrote Before I Go to Sleep in a slightly cocooned environment of being on this course and being surrounded by my course mates and my tutor, who were kind of very supportive and sort of read stuff and were like, or actually that works quite well, you should go with that, So that felt very, protective and very sort of reassuring, to be told that I was more or less on the right track. Which obviously for books 2 and Final Cut, I suppose I did get that in a way, but it becomes much more sporadic, because I'd go away and work for 6 months or whatever, and then show work to my agent or my editors, and then get feedback. It wasn't a kind of weekly. I've written 5,000 words, whatever, and here's so it was a kind of less intense. It was much more of it. I have to sort of like ride without stabilizers on and look at my own work and stuff.
So I'm assuming when you were on that writing course, it was kind of a structured, guided process, maybe a lot of planning involved. And did you take that with you throughout your career, or have you changed that at all, or do you?
I changed it. Yeah, okay. I think because Before I Go to Sleep, I've always really loved hearing those stories of those authors who say that they just get a tingle of an idea, and then they start writing, or they get an image, and they start writing and see where the work takes them, and that sounds very alluring and sort of very exciting to me, and very sort of, and also it means you can just write a book. You don't need to sit and plan it, But and weirdly, Before I Go to Sleep kind of did almost happen like that. I had an idea for the opening scene, and then I had an idea for the twist or the truth, that's in the book. But I just wrote it, and there were dead ends and stuff, but it kind of worked. But now I've realised that actually that was a one-off. That was lucky that worked, and the kinds of books that I write and that I want to write generally speaking, don't really work like that. So now I'm much more of a planner.
Oh.
And yeah, Final Cut was planned in quite a lot of detail. And the book I'm working on now, even more, I actually said to myself, I remember, when would it have been? Well, I think I'm more or less finished Final Cut. I mean, there were other sort of like copy editing stuff to do, but it was more or less done. It's sort of like October, November, maybe of last year. And so I started thinking about the new book. I told myself I wasn't allowed to write for 6 months. I said, even if everything feels perfect and I've got a perfect plan and I know all my characters backwards, you know, I'm not allowed to write until April the 1st of this year. So that's a way that my work has really changed in terms of how I approach.
That's interesting.
And what drew you to the like psychological thriller? Because you mentioned before that you quite a lover of fantasy in terms of like as a reader. So what made you sort of want to write in the psychological thriller realm in that sense?
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, my reading taste kind of changed. I don't read fantasy anymore, and that's not in any kind of snobby way or any kind of like I don't look down on it at all. It's just not really. It's not on my radar at the moment. So my reading taste changed, and it's weird because I remember when my agent, when Claire first saw Before I Go to Sleep, she turned around to me and she said, "You do know this is a psychological thriller, don't you?" And I didn't. I didn't. It was just a story for me. It was a book I'd written. I hadn't really thought about what genre it was in, and I didn't really read that many psychological thrillers, which I think is probably why it. Certainly with that book, it came from a slightly odd place. I think it was a slightly different take on the psychological thriller. It just, it didn't start with a dead body on page one or a, and so I think, but looking back, I mean, on the books I've read, the films I love, all that kind of stuff, I realized I was always reading and watching psychological thrillers in some way, because those are the stories I've always loved. I've always loved the stories where there's a twist, where stuff happens, where you discover that actually that person isn't really that person, or that they haven't got the motivation that you thought they had. That where there are surprises and turn the page. I mean, even some of my favorite authors have kind of, I don't know, like sort of what you might call literary fiction, although I have a problem with that because it's just another genre anyway. But anyway, that's perhaps another podcast. But even those authors, I'll often think that was beautifully written and I love the characters and I really enjoyed the book, but I just wish something had happened. I just wish more had happened. So I've always loved books where stuff happens, basically, and so it was kind of inevitable, really.
So what would be a favorite psychological thriller film of yours? Have you got one?
This is where my mind goes blank and I can't think of it. I mean, stuff like, I don't know. I mean, would you call it Fight Club is my favorite film. Would you call it a psychological thriller? I don't know, really, because it's so sort of, it's its own thing, really. Yeah. But it's that kind of twist that I love. Same with the Sixth Sense, which I think came out around the same time. Those are the kind of. So I don't know. Yeah, so many of them.
Are you in the camp?
A great twist. I mean, I know I read it as a book before I saw it as the film, but I remember with Gone Girl being every single person I met, especially writers, were telling me you've got to read this book. And I remember, and this is no disrespect to Gillian Flynn, but I remember, and about a quarter of the way through it, I was like, this is good, but I don't understand why everyone is so, you've got to read this. And then I reached the twist, which is exactly halfway through, which I also noticed. I don't know if that was coincidence or not, but it was exactly halfway through. And I was like, okay. Now I get it, So yeah, that's a great example, I think.
I always find that as an issue when people say, oh, you've got to watch this or you've got to read this, and it's hyped up so much. You get into it and you're kind of disappointed, even though it is good, because you expect so much. It's quite frustrating.
I had that with Michelle Faber's Under the Skin, which I think is a brilliant book, but and I love that film. Again, that's not really a psychological thriller, is it? But my friend pressed that into my hands and said, "You've got to. This will blow your mind. This is like the biggest twist I've ever experienced or read." And I read it, but I think what my friend had forgotten was the twist happens on like page 4. You realise really early on what's actually going on. So I was reading the whole thing, thinking there's going to be another twist that, Anyway, so yeah, you're exactly right. I think when something has too much expectation beyond it, sometimes it can fail to live up to it, and you're better off going in cold.
Yeah. As a writer now, is that difficult that you've got a readership out there that are expecting twists and expecting a good twist from you, so therefore reading the book going, oh, I think this is going to happen, possibly this, maybe this?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. It is I'm finding it, I am constantly, it's something I'm quite anxious about at the moment, because I don't want to go down the M. Night Shyamalan. I don't know if right, but I think the problem there, I mean, I thought Sixth Sense had such a good twist, and then, I mean, I can't remember what came after it, but it feels like every single film he made, he tried for a bigger and bigger twist, and actually it was diminishing returns because people were like expecting it, and he became sort of known as the guy who did the twist. And I don't think it did any favors. And so, I mean, I think the books are right, will always have surprises and reveals in them. But I don't want to become known as the twist guy, because I think I don't want to be that person that, you read the book and on page one you're looking for who isn't the person they say they are, who is actually alive when you think they're dead, who is, whatever it might be. Because I think it becomes less telling a story then and more kind of playing a game with the reader, which I mean, some people enjoy that, don't they? That's why we love whodunits, trying to work out who it was and what the motive was. There's nothing wrong with it, but so I don't ever want to write a book where nothing happens, or where I think there are always going to be surprises, but the surprises might not be quite so. Sort of. I might stop trying for the big twist.
So we have a few like stock questions that we ask on the show, and that we ask every author that comes on. And one of those questions is, if you could change the ending to any novel that you've read, which novel would it be and why?
Any novel that I've read? Oh God, I don't know. Weirdly, this feels disrespectful though. I did not like the ending of Gone Girl, but then I was also, I think, because especially now I'm in that sort of world and writing those sorts of books, I can't ever really read them as a reader anymore. Purely as a reader, it's very rare that I forget that I get so engrossed in a book that I've only got my reading head on. There's always a bit of me that's like, well, how is this working? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, are they really going to go there? Yes, they are. Whatever. So, but with Gone Girl, I did read the ending. Oh, and I was really disappointed. But then I actually did also think, but what could she have done? I mean, this is difficult to talk about without giving away the end, obviously, isn't it? But
yeah,
not really a lot that she could have done different. That would have been. I think any ending would have been slightly unsatisfying, because she created such horrible people. You still sort of felt the need to spend your time. So yeah, maybe that one. I don't know.
If you could take, this is along the same lines, a fictional character, and make them your own, or adapt them into your own sort of stories, or whatever you want to do with them, what character would you pick? In any sort of TV or book? Yeah.
What character would I pick? Again, going back to Fight Club, I really love the character of Marla Singer.
Oh, that is a great choice that we've not had. I would love you to do that. That'd be brilliant.
I mean, I am slightly in love with her in a way, but I think in her rather than anything else. I think she's so, I think she's a great character, both in the book and the film.
So yeah, story from her perspective would be a fantastic read, wouldn't it?
It really would.
In my notebook, I might write that.
Yeah. And we kind of came up with an organic question the other day. We watched a film yesterday. We didn't do it together, but separately. And we quite like the idea, if you could banish any book, so it didn't exist anymore, it was gone, out of people's memories, what book would that be? If I could banish... Yeah, so like in yesterday, the concept is you can't remember the Beatles, they're gone. Oh, right. And Harry Potter disappears. You watched the film yesterday. I thought you meant you watched the film. No. Yeah. So if you could get rid of any book, so it didn't exist. And then I could rewrite it as my own. Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Harry Potter, obviously. I don't know actually. Oh,
Harry Potter is a wise choice, but it took a long time to get off the ground, didn't it?
yeah,
By all accounts, it was a publisher's daughter or something that picked that up
yeah,
and nagged to get
yeah,
it done,
exactly. Yeah,
which is
I think
fascinating.
maybe actually I would banish before I go to sleep, and I
Okay.
would rewrite it now.
Mm.
I think I'm a better writer now, and I could do a better job of it.
Mm.
Um, so maybe that.
Would you change twist elements in that, or would you
No, I
just
don't think I changed the
change?
story. I,
Mm.
I think it's just. I think my writing style has improved. So I think the story probably more or less I'd keep intact.
Mm.
Mm.
Apart from one thing, I made one thing that I regret, and it's like something that Rowan, who did the film of Before I Go to Sleep, and he picks up on, and I think he was absolutely right. He changed one thing about it. He changed the fact that in the book, um, the character's son dies in I think it's Afghanistan, and Rowan was like it felt like a sort of self-consciously contemporary reference that I
Mm.
crowbarred in to try and it's absolutely right. So yeah, I would change that. But that's a kind of trivial thing.
Mm. But how was that process going from obviously writing a book that was solely for you, a book that you wanted to read,
Mm.
to then going onto the big screen in a really big way? How did you find that process and deal with it?
It was amazing and surreal and incredible and all those things you'd expect because I'd never. I mean, it was on the very edge of my hope that that it would even be published because
Mm.
you know most people who write books don't get their book published, and the fact it might then go on to be a bestseller was I never really even did that. So the fact it might end up on a cinema screen with Nicole Kidman and Colin Firth literally never even it was like as absurd as like planning on winning the lottery. It's not something you do. You might play
Mm.
the lottery and sort of hope you might win, but you don't spend the money, do you?
Yeah.
Because you know it's not going to happen, probably not going to happen. So it's like that, and so when it kind of started, it was all very surreal. And I remember I'd heard so many stories about films that nearly get made but don't quite happen or whatever. And I remember even when we were in discussion and we'd signed contracts and so on, and the script was written, and at every stage through, I wasn't getting that excited because I thought, well, any minute now, Nicole Kidman might decide that actually she's got to have her nails done on that day or whatever, or something comes along, or or a manager says, actually, you should do this rather than that. And so I remember I told myself that when Nicole Kidman was on the set and there was filming the camera and she was saying the words, then I would get excited. And so it was a really great process for me actually, because I also had made the decision not to get involved because I heard so many stories about authors that try and get involved in adaptations of their own work and they just end up screwing it up or making everyone have a miserable time. And I had a really good relationship with Rowan and Liza, who was the producer, and so they would contact me all the time to say, we're thinking of this, we're thinking of that, we're thinking of even some costume decisions. Rowan was sending me an email saying, we've decided that Claire ought to be wearing this, and whereas in the book she's sort of more wearing that. Is that all right? It's like, yeah, of course, it's all filmed. And I thought, because I made the decision that if they came up with an idea that I thought was absurd or that I really disagreed with, then I would have fought a battle. Although I had no ammunition. I mean, I've signed the contract, which gives me, but unless that happened, and it didn't happen, I just sort of enjoyed it and went along for the ride. So it was a really great process. I don't think it could be better. I mean, I've heard so many stories of people who haven't had a good time seeing their film, seeing their book being turned into film or TV, or else have just been completely pushed out of the story. And so I had the best of both worlds because I was involved, but didn't have any responsibilities, basically.
I mean, even when your book gets optioned, it's still, like you said, there was still a lot of doubt there, wasn't there, when that happens? Because a lot of books get optioned and nothing happens. So when I was going to say when you actually heard the news, but you said the whole way through you were just still kind of, I'm not going to get excited about this just in case. Did you, even though you weren't directly telling them sort of no on occasions of what they're suggesting, but did you get on set? Did you sort of involve yourself that way?
Yeah, Liza made the mistake of telling me I could go on set as long as I wanted, and so I was like, it was almost every day. I think no, I went on a few times, and again that was just, it's a really weird thing because I don't know, but if you realise, but film sets are actually really boring places because most of the time nothing, well, lots is happening, but nothing, not the exciting stuff that you expect. It's people wandering around with cables, you know, and plugging, you know, moving lights around and stuff. So it's a very strange place, and I remember. The first time I went on set, I was literally playing on my phone, or maybe, I don't know if I was playing on my phone, but I was looking at my phone, whatever, Twitter or whatever. And then I felt a tap on my shoulder and I looked up and it was Liza and she said, can I just introduce you to Nicole? And Nicole Kidman was stood there right in front of me, in costume, about to go and do a take. So in costume with a wig on and everything, looking like this character that I'd invented. And it was so weird. Not because it was Nicole Kidman, although obviously that was weird in itself because, you know, working class boy from Stourbridge doesn't meet Nicole Kidman. So that was strange. But also the fact that she was so, it was like my imagination come to life and walking and talking in front of me. It was kind of, it was so weird, so weird. Yeah, so I did end up going on set all the time. Took my mom.
Was it just very strange? Did you find it really weird just watching your sort of work come to life in that respect?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just, yeah, it was just exciting because it's like, I remember going back to fantasy again. I remember watching the DVD of Lord of the Rings, you know, the film obviously, and I watched the DVD extras, which went on for hours, if I remember rightly. But I watched some of them anyway, and I do remember there was some behind the scenes footage. And that was the nearest. It looked sort of like, I remember this was before I'd even started writing before I go to sleep. And I remember thinking, oh, it looks so exciting to be on a film set. I wish I'd kind of done something different. So I suppose back then I was probably thinking, I wish I'd trained to be a sound engineer or I don't know what. But, you know, it would, I bet that looks so fun to kind of be there making a film. And I remember, and that was as close as I'd ever got to being on a film set. And then fast forward 5-6 years, maybe, I don't know. And I'm there not only on the set, but I'm not plugging the lights in. Not anything wrong with that, obviously, you know. But I'm there as the creator of the characters. That it's just so strange. Yeah,
mind blowing.
So SJ, like all this does. I mean, it's amazing. It's like you said, winning the lottery, living the dream. How do you motivate yourself now then in terms of like what's for SJ in the future? What do you want out of the next? You know, I know you talked about when you die, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Looking back on your life,
not dying?
Yeah. What are you hoping for, like over the next like 10 years? What when you look back on your life, what would be a good life for you from this point?
I would like. I mean, yeah. If I can go fast forward 10 years, what I would like to be in, where I'd like to be in 10 years, I'd like to have written a fair few more novels. I don't want them to be 5 years between every one. And them all to be ones that I'm proud of. I mean, you know, it wouldn't be terrible if there was some I was more proud of than others. Well, that's inevitable, I suppose, isn't it? You know. I remember when Claire, my agent, asked me this question when we first met, and I said I like every book I write to be better than the one before it. And she read before I go to sleep, and she said, "Okay, well." You know, but there is a sense of, I think whether each book sells more or less than the one before it, I'd like to feel that I'm developing as a writer, that I'm learning, that I'm getting better on some level. So I'd like that, and I'd also like to do something for TV or film, to sort of expand my storytelling, because I think that's really exciting, and I do love the idea of something that's kind of collaborative, and yeah, I mean, because I think especially TV at the moment, there are so many exciting things happening, and it's such a rich you know, place to work. So
if you could, on that note, if you could collaborate with any author of your choice, who would you like to work with?
I don't know. I do think Gillian Flynn is actually, I mean, and she's come up a lot in this conversation, hasn't she? But I do think her 3 novels are all spectacular. And I mean, I don't know if she wrote Sharp Objects. I mean, I know she wrote the book, but I don't know if she wrote the TV show. But I thought that was a fabulous TV adaptation as well. So yeah, maybe Gillian. Yeah.
Okay.
So have you?
Sorry,
I was going to say, on the subject of other authors, have you met any authors of books that you've read and had like any sort of surreal moments? Like, have you met Margaret Atwood, for example, or?
I have briefly in a signing queue though. But I sent her I sent her a copy before I go to sleep, or I asked my Canadian editor to anyway, and she sent me a lovely card back. You know, congratulations on the publication of your debut, what a thrill and everything. And so she was in town in London promoting, I don't know which one of hers it was, but anyway, one of her. And I queued up to get it signed, and we had a 10-minute chat, much to everyone's annoyance. I could just feel the hatred for the whole huge queue. You know, it's going to be hours anyway. But yeah, we had a lovely chat. You know, we talked about Nicole Kidman and her nose. We were talking about the what was it, the hours? You know. Yeah, so that was a surreal kind of moment. I mean, I've met lots of authors, you know, doing circuit and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange because I remember it's not an author. Well, actually, no, he has written a book, so it is. But I remember I was at my agent runs a festival, and in its first year or second year, maybe we went. She had a party to kind of launch it, and so I was in this really big old house, sitting next to Adamant, chatting about. I think he'd had an autobiography or something, or anyway, I can't really remember. And then I was just taking this completely for granted. And then suddenly from nowhere, I just remembered that how old would I have been? 10-year-old me, who was a huge Adamant fan and loved Prince Charming or whatever the album was. I was like, oh my God, I'm sitting next to Adamant, and I've only just realised how incredible that is, you know.
Yeah.
So there were lots of people like that I sort of never dreamt I would. Ian McEwan was very charming when I met him. He was very kind of encouraging and very nice.
So we're going to have to wrap up soon because we're approaching an hour.
Cool.
But Final Cut is obviously out now, and you mentioned you were working on another project. What can we look forward to? What's coming out in the near future?
Well, the new book that I'm working on now. I mean, I'm in that kind of weird phase where I've written most of a first draft, but I haven't read it properly in one chunk. I've obviously read it as I've been going through, but and I've stuck to my plan, so that's a good thing. But there is still that possibility I might read it and decide it's rubbish and whatever.
Would you be the type to if you didn't like it, scrap it?
Yeah. I think you have. I think one has to be really. Otherwise, I would. I mean, I suppose there's a difference between. I mean, I can't put a book out that I'm not happy with.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons there's such a long gap between books 2 and 3. Actually, was because there was a book that I did scrap.
Okay.
Anyway, but that's not what we're talking about. So I'm obviously hopeful that I'm going to read it and think, my God, this is the best book that's ever been written, and it's brilliant. It doesn't even need editing. That's not. All being well, so I'm going to get. I've got obviously this book to sort of send out into the world, and then working on that. So hopefully that will be out fairly soon. I mean, when I say fairly soon, this is fairly soon in publishing year, so it might be 2 years, but you know. So and then as I was sort of like saying earlier, I'd love to be working on something for TV at some point. But I mean, again, who knows? There are lots of, especially now, given what's happened in the world, there are lots of hurdles before something goes from being an idea in my head to something appearing on a TV screen. So that's a kind of that's a sort of vague, at some point in the future goal. But yeah, that's what. There are going to be no albums or things like that. I'm not going
to. So for anyone who isn't familiar with Final Cut and doesn't know it exists, and they're seeing this video or they're hearing this podcast for the first time, who would the book appeal to? And can you tell us as much as you can about it without giving anything away?
It will appeal to absolutely everybody, obviously. I think it'll certainly, I think, appeal to anyone who's enjoyed any of my other books, because it very much has my DNA in it. I think in a conscious way, because I don't think I can write in a way that doesn't have my DNA in it. But it feels like a very natural progression, especially from Before I Go to Sleep. I think it has lots of the same preoccupations. It's a very different book, but so I think it will appeal to those people. I think anyone who enjoys that kind of page turner, slightly dark thriller, will like it. The story follows a woman who is trying to follow up. She's a documentary filmmaker and is trying to follow up her first very successful film, and she decides to make a film that's composed primarily of contributions from people who live in this village in the north of England on the coast. And so the idea is she gets people to sort of film their everyday life, and she's going to edit it all together. But when she goes up there to sort of make this film, she becomes drawn into a dark secret that's in the village, if that makes sense, and gets obsessed by trying to find out the truth behind the story of a girl that went missing some years previously, and another girl who apparently took her own life, but there is some question mark over whether she was killed. So I suppose, that sums up the kind of idea behind the story, but
without giving anything away.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There's a couple of random questions we like to ask at the end of the show, and even though we are
these are difficult, these random questions.
No, these are much more simpler. So, do you agree? We used these a lot last season as a battle between me and Chris, but it was overwhelming that I won most of the battles. So we don't do that anymore because I don't want to shame him too much. But pineapple on pizza, do you agree or disagree?
I disagree.
Oh,
yes.
I was bigging myself up there. And
1-0 to me.
I mean, I have no problem if other people want to do it, but just don't bring it anywhere near me.
Yeah. Okay. Galaxy or Dairy Milk?
Probably Galaxy.
Yes.
Oh, my days. Okay.
2-0.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, Star Wars.
That wasn't a battle. That's just
that's a good one to do. But...
this was though. Darth Maul or Kylo Ren? Better villain?
Oh, I don't know actually.
Ugh.
I don't really like either of them. Kylo Ren, I think, perhaps just.
Yeah.
That's
2-1 now. But I don't like either of them either. But I thought Darth Maul was just, as a villain, he was silent. He was a great acrobat. Like he had a double lightsaber. What was not to like? He had horns on his head.
Yeah, we'll give him that. Yeah, maybe Kylo Ren with horns on the head would be the perfect.
The Beatles or Elvis?
Beatles. Okay. I don't really know Elvis, to be honest, very much.
Yeah.
So, but I would go for Beatles.
I can't really remember anymore. Chris, what other ones did we have there? Was there any?
No.
Oh,
there's one about olives. You didn't like olives.
No. Are you a fan of olives?
Olives are good, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a fan, but
We'll have to come up with more of these. By all means, if you've got any comparisons we can ask in future shows, let us know. But we're struggling to think of these random ones. Okay, so your book is out on paperback, hardback, audiobook. It's on all platforms, and it's available now. Final Cut.
Is it available on all platforms? No, not paperback yet.
Hardback, ebook, audiobook, but not paperback.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's the airport paperback, but yeah.
Okay. And your website, which I've had a look on, is a fantastic looking website, by the way. sjwatsonbooks.com. And we will leave links to that in the description of the show as well. But thank you so much for coming on. I've had a genuine pleasure
thank you.
to you.
Yeah, thank you very
and
much.
It's been fantastic. And now the hour has passed. It is starting to get really warm. Or is that just me? The sun is coming out. Yeah. Excellent. So have you got... Oh, you mentioned earlier you got plans for the day, so I really hope you have a good time. And and thank you for
so much food that we'll see whether I survive it.
Amazing.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of pictures on Twitter. I like the tweets that you do with your dog and the food and everything. They're really good, so keep them coming.
Yeah, I will. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.